story on the front page of many of the papers today, and it's continuing to evolve over the course of the day, is this bloke H6. That's all we know about his name. There's an injunction on his name, and even if I knew his name, which I don't, I couldn't tell you for legal reasons. But H6 is a Chinese businessman who got very, very close to Prince Andrew. In fact, was invited to his birthday party, and really... now the question is, should that have happened? He's been banned from the UK. That's clearly a big security screw-up. Let's talk to Will Geddes, who is a security expert. Will, how did this happen, do you think?
Well, I mean, certainly in terms of why we're getting to know about this now, Peter, is fundamentally down to the fact that his appeal for returning into the UK has been rejected on the grounds of national security, which I think tells you quite a bit, in addition to the fact that we've now also established that MI5 rinsed his phone, or cloned and downloaded the contents of his phone when he was in the UK back in 2021. Now, this whole situation's been going on for some time, and H6, as you say, who hasn't been specifically named, has had ties to the UK since about 2002. So he is very much following what I would term as a standard tradecraft for a hostile state actor, trying to ingratiate his way into the higher echelons of society, politics, and the like, and particularly in this instance, Prince Andrew, obviously a member of the royal family, to use that as a strategic stepping stone to then move into other areas. But there are some big questions right now, Peter, about how, in the knowledge of this individual's activities, and how much did Prince Andrew profiteer by his relationship with not only this individual but other individuals in China, because he's been an envoy to China for trade for quite some time.
And actually, even if you, as you say, has been an envoy, and of course his fall from grace happened about 5 years ago, we know that if there is a Chinese figure trying to get close to someone in public life, whether it is an MP, as we've seen previously, trying to work for their office or whatever, I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that we should be completely suspicious of all Chinese people, but if there is a Chinese national who is attempting to get close to a senior figure in the establishment of this country, no matter who it was, surely eyebrows should be raised. I mean, presumably some checks would be brought in for people who are working with royals, even if it is a non-working royal, such as Prince Andrew.
Well, you would have thought, Peter, but there has been a rather interesting leak of a letter, or certainly communications, from one of Prince Andrew's senior advisors, who talks about basically circumventing some of the protocols and some of the restrictions and barriers that would normally, one would hope, be in place to ensure that this individual would have been vetted before he was brought into contact with Prince Andrew. But Prince Andrew invited this individual to his 60th birthday party, in addition to the Chinese ambassador. There's also a big question mark over his former wife, Sarah Ferguson.
Let's get to that in just a second, Will. Right. But I just want to read out a little bit of this letter that you mentioned there. The phone contained a letter from Dominic Hampshire, who was a senior advisor to Prince Andrew, dated March 2021, referring to the alleged spy having been invited to the Duke's birthday party that month. It stated, "I also hope that it is clear to you where you sit with my principal and indeed his family. You should never underestimate the strength of that relationship. Outside of his closest internal confidence, you sit at the very top of a tree that many, many people would like to be on." The letter added that following a meeting with Andrew, they had wisely navigated our way around the former private secretaries, and we have found a way to carefully remove those people who we don't completely trust. Under your guidance, we found a way to get the relevant people unnoticed in and out of the House of Windsor. I mean, this doesn't exactly scream, brilliant espionage, or maybe it is brilliant espionage. It sort of screams completely incompetent people around Prince Andrew, although I'm sure Dominic Hampshire would deny that.
I might be a little bit more cynical than you, Peter,
no.
And place it beyond it being just incompetence. The one thing that we know with China is China has presented for a number of decades now major threats, not only to the UK, but to the United States and other European countries, by trying to ingratiate, as I mentioned, themselves into society or into the lives of people in the public eye. Now, the purposes of doing that is, like I could say, the great Peter Cardwell. I'm a good friend of him. That gives me a great degree of credibility if I want to speak to some of your colleagues, some of your peers, some of your associates. Now, obviously, going into somewhere and saying, I'm a close friend of Prince Andrew. And let's not forget, something also that has come to light is that Prince Andrew authorized H6, this particular individual, to speak on his behalf with a number of Chinese businesses back in China, but also the Eurasia Fund, which is a conglomeration of funds that monies are then invested into China, and China invests back into the United Kingdom. Now, where I see this right now is the fact that what we do know with the tradecraft used by China, but also used by Russia and other hostile states, is to gather sufficient intelligence. And a lot of this could be very personal information that those individuals might not want disclosed to the public. And that can be used as leverage, or in simpler terms, blackmail, to then get to other stepping points or introductions. And it is about introductions, and it is about gaining trust. And what we can say in some defense of Prince Andrew is that this whole situation came about, and I don't think coincidence, I think it was very much manipulated, that it came around the same time as he'd just come off the back of that absolute crisis of an interview that he did with Newsnight, and around the same time as the beginnings of the legal case by Virginia Giuffre that she was taking up in the United States against him. So he was extremely vulnerable, he was extremely isolated, and he was probably throwing his hands out in different directions. Now, bear in mind also that his brother, when he became king, also told him to move out of his existing accommodations and move into Frogmore Cottage, which Andrew wanted to resist. And his brother said, I'm not going to pay or subsidize you living in your existing residence. So Andrew and his wife, which we can come to if you want.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead. Now's the time. Go ahead, Will.
Well, Sarah Ferguson has also been connected to another Chinese business where they paid her something like £300,000 plus a £76,000 a year retainer for her to represent this particular business in China. So what hasn't been brought to light, and I think needs to be brought to light, is basically Prince Andrew's finances. How much has he been profiteering? How much money has he been paid? And how much, by proxy, is he at compromise?
Well, that's a big point, and also the fact that he is a non-working royal. You might ask the question, what's the point, what's in it really for the Chinese? He's not going to be privy to too many state secrets, as perhaps he would have been to some degree previously when he was a working royal. I can sense, I know, of course, we can see the desperation, the money, the people he's associating himself with, the fact that he is so incredibly isolated. But I suppose, again, to be cynical, what is in it for the Chinese here, Will?
Well, what's in it for them is the connections. Now, he isn't, as you rightly say, Peter, a working royal, but there will be a number of individuals that the use of his name will open particular doors for them. I don't think he was the end target by any stretch of the imagination, because for all the reasons you've just mentioned, Peter, he won't be party to any state secrets, he won't be party to any political decisions, but Prince Andrew will have connections in those circles that, by proxy of using Prince Andrew to open up those doors, could give the Chinese opportunities to socially engineer information for their own benefit. Now, we know with the Chinese, allegedly, I say that, they're infamous for stealing state secrets.
Yeah.
They're infamous for
they're not our friend.
Intellectual property rights. Whereas the Russians use a lot of force and they use a lot of cyber, the Chinese use economic means and social engineering and influencing politics in various different ways, although Russia does a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, and academia as well. I'm really concerned about some of the Chinese links into some of our biggest and best universities as well. I mean, the royal family is keeping pretty tight-lipped about this, and actually there've been a number of royal journalists who've been trying to get something out of Andrew's people in regard to this, but it's sort of quite hard to contact them because he's sort of off the radar in that regard as well. I mean, what would you imagine the reaction in royal circles and royal security circles will be to this? Will it sort of be casting eyes to the ceiling going, here we go again, another dodgy link of Prince Andrew, that he is, that he is consorting with people who do not have his best interests at heart because he is so vulnerable? And presumably this will make him, I mean, not that I'm asking you to be a psychologist, but this will presumably make him retreat even further and be even more paranoid about the people around him.
I think if he wasn't isolated already, Peter, he's going to be even more isolated, compartmentalized, and told literally to stay off the grid. Now, the problem is as you rightly say, he's not a working royal. So in terms of what he has to live on, that's the big question. Where is he going to get his remuneration from? However, he is, I think a rolling of the eyes is probably, the people may be getting a migraine in the royal family right now for what his actions are, and what is yet again a very poor judgment of character of individuals that he seems to associate himself with. Ghislaine Maxwell was one, H6 is another.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. He's not the best judge of character, is he?
Apparently not. Will, you're a very good judge of character, so thank you very much for joining me this evening. Will Geddes, their security expert, telling us all about Prince Andrew.